Tonight we'll be joined by Miss Suzanne Fowler, a teacher, researcher, and mother of two, who at first glance leads a fairly quiet life. But when you dig a little deeper, she runs one of the most extensive paranormal research sites on the Internet. Her specialty is shadow people, something we've all seen out of the corner of our eyes, but just not quite sure what to make of it. To learn more about shadow people, visit shadowpeople.org. That is shadowpeople.org. Tonight's show will be broken down into two segments. The first segment will be an hour interview with Ms. Suzanne Fowler, followed by up to a second full hour of open lines. The call-in number to tonight's show is 760-542-3929. Again, that's 760-542-3929. Good evening and welcome, Suzanne. You're on the air.
Oh, hello. Santos, I believe it is. And the name is Susan.
Okay.
Not Suzanne.
Okay.
That's all right.
Okay. Well, I wanted to thank you for joining us again. You said you have a cold, and I really appreciate you coming on the air with being a little under the weather, I guess.
Yeah,
so,
I hope you can understand me because I'm quite plugged up, but I didn't dare want to take Benadryl or anything like that, a Dulupi or something. So
no, you're fine. The show's been running really smooth since we started. I've been getting better and better at it, and we started the show to make it an addition to our forum, and I don't know what happened tonight. It may be the shadow people, because I was having a hard problem getting into the switchboard.
That's what I was thinking too. They're probably running amok on the show.
Yeah, we see these things. Let's just jump right into it, because I really was awestruck at. I literally have not had this many problems with it. wasn't not being prepared. It was the screen wasn't working. We see these things out of the corner of our eyes. We turn to look, and we catch a glimpse of something that we think we saw, and then we end up questioning our own judgment. Now we call these shadow people. Can you tell us more about them?
Well, shadow people are kind of an entity or a kind of ghost, or you can call them a demon. But they're what they really are is an ultra-dimensional being from another dimension, another plane of existence, that every once in a while our planes kind of converge or pass through one over another. And you can see these things just for a brief moment, and then you can't see them anymore. It's brief. It's usually really a flash that you see these beings out of the corner of your eyes or in front of you. They don't stay for very long. Most of them don't. So, and ghosts can be one category, but I think there are many dimensions and many planes, and the shadow people are one particular type of plane.
Do you
and
believe
they can be broken down in other planes too, for the subcategory of shadow people that exist.
There are different types of shadow people?
Oh, yes, there certainly are. There are 4 different kinds from my database, and I have a database that I've been collecting for over 13 years. I have approximately 2,000 entries in the database, and I've broken them down to 4 different types of shadow people. There are the humanoid shapes. They're dark. They're a human silhouette. That also includes the garbed shadow people. Those are the shadow people that have hats, hoods, cloaks, but they're usually a definite human, identifiably human form, an earth form. Then the second type are the exaggerated humanoid forms. I don't think these beings have ever been human. They're very human-like, except for they have very exaggerated features like long arms. Their long arms tend to be elongated. They seem to be unusually tall. I've gotten emails from dozens, just hundreds of people saying that they see shadow people that are over 8 feet high, some even as tall as 9 feet. So that's not a normal human shape to see a human being that tall. As I said, they usually have some other oversized appendage. It might be their head. It might be their hands, but something's not quite exact human form about them. The third type is the amorphous type. And there are quite a lot of these. These are shapeless, cloudy, whirling, smoky shadows. They're not in definite form. They don't have a shape. And a lot of people say they'll see. Go ahead.
Are they like a cloud or?
Well, I put a collection of these amorphous shapes under that particular title because they're simply shapeless. They can be cloud-like. I've heard them be like a pillar, just like a pillar that goes up and down, or they swirl and move, or they might be orb-shaped. Okay, they don't have any form. They seem to be predominantly shapeless. And then the last type, for no other reason, I put this fourth type as animal shadows. People do see animal-sized shadows in their houses, outside even. They can be cat-like. They can dart across the room. Sometimes they see small shadows along the baseboard. They don't seem to fit the other three, so I developed this fourth one for just animal-like shadows. So there are about four different types of shadow people.
Have you determined what their reasoning of being is, or their nature? Are they just benevolent, or are they here for good purposes or bad purposes, or different purposes?
Again, right. It is hard to determine exactly because they seem to be doing three different things. A certain segment of shadows are just standing there. They don't notice you, but you notice them. But they don't seem to be aware of you or their surroundings. It's almost as like the planes have somehow merged. Their dimension is merged with ours for a brief period, and you're watching a shadow being, looking off in the distance somewhere. He's not aware that he's in your dimension, and that's usually a brief occurrence. The second type is the more common type. Those are the watchers. Those are shadows that usually stand in a room and watch a person. Why they watch it totally escapes me, but it's almost as if they're here to study us, or they're doing some research, or maybe they're time travelers. This part I don't quite understand, but they're watching us. They come to watch, and they're always surprised that they know that they're being watched. As soon as a person sees the shadow and reacts to it, the watcher shadow will be surprised that it can be seen. And these watcher shadows flee the minute that they are seen. They leave. Now, the last type is the most malevolent. These are the ones that people will classify as demon or evil, sinister types. They are predominantly nighttime shadows, and they appear at night, usually in the bedroom, when somebody is sleeping, and they usually try to, the best way I could put it is they try to scare the person. When that person is awakened and he can't move yet, but he's aware of the shadow in the room, that person is usually terrified if they see it. And usually these particular shadow people want that to occur. They want to be threatening. They want to scare. But they can't really hurt anyone. So those are the three different reasons why they seem to be here that I can tell.
That last description of what you said, it was something I haven't thought about in a long time, but I actually experienced that one night. I woke up feeling a presence in the room, and
yep.
I felt a presence in the room, and I was in another country in Latin America, and they had big vaulted ceilings, and I remember it scared the daylights out of me because there was something in the rafters, and then it was gone. That's a shadow person, or
that's exactly right. Mhm. I had those too.
So
I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would feel something very nasty in the room with me. It was just no doubt there's something very sinister, and you could call it evil. I hate to use the word evil, but sinister sounds more accurate to me. And I thought it would hurt me, but it never did. And after about 40 minutes, it left. I never saw it, but I did feel it. And that is really, and I could move. I was not paralyzed. That was the difference between me and some of the other experiencers who have talked about the nighttime shadows, is that they were paralyzed. However, I was not.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah.
These can be generational, too. Which means to say is if you're seeing them, probably somebody else in your family can see them. Whether it's your mom could see them, or if you have a son, he'll see them. I just found out that my daughter has exactly the same nighttime experiences with these shadow people that I had at her age. She just told me about it a couple of weeks ago.
Huh. That's interesting.
So it's passed down. Yeah, it is.
Has anyone ever communicated with them? Are they trying to communicate with us, or have you heard anything about that? It seems like communication with shadow people is very, very difficult. I don't think their purpose here is to try to communicate, so it's hard to make the connection with these beings, because they're either here because they're just here and they don't know that they're here, and we see them for a brief moment, or they're here to watch but they're not here to talk. Or, and the last one, of course, is just to provoke fear. I've noticed a few people have said that they've tried to communicate, but they never heard anything back, with the one exception that the person said that the shadow person told them not to move. But that's all he heard. And, of course, he was in a frozen state and couldn't move anyway. And that was one of the more threatening shadows. So communication is not a strong suit with these beings. It's not something that they do. Do you feel a distinction between shadow people and just what we would consider a regular ghost?
I think that they are somehow different than ghosts. I'm still making this transition into feeling that way just recently, because behavior, the reason for my database was not only to find out the common denominators of all these experiences with shadow people, but to find out the psychology behind why they're here. And the reason why ghosts are here is simply, most of them, there are two types of ghosts, and they're either floating through because you're seeing a repeat of a past event, or they're here to communicate with somebody, which is something clearly shadow people don't do. So I'm inclined to think the majority of shadow people are not ghosts. There might be a subcategory of ghosts that appear as shadows, simply because some people do not have the psychic talents to bring in all the details of a ghost, so they can appear as shadow form. I think the shadow person that I saw was a watcher. The one, and it was not a ghost, but he was very human form in every shape. Now, he might have been a ghost and a watcher, but then why not communicate with me? You know what I mean? What's he here for, just to watch? So that part is still murky, but there's still clearly a lot of action that the shadow people do that don't quite fit the ghost pattern.
Is there a particular time when people see them the most? Like, are they more prevalent at nighttime as opposed to daytime, or is it vice versa, or does that even matter? Shadow
people have been seen during the day, in the sunlight, outside, inside, in basements, in the woods. They can be seen anywhere. I just got an email from a girl who said that she saw one in a mall, of all places. So they can be seen anywhere. The email that comes to me is more the stories seem to happen more at night when they're trying to sleep. Now, whether this is commonplace or not, I don't know, or whether people are more afraid at night, and that's why I get the emails if they're scared. And the daytime shadow people that are seen don't provoke anywhere near the fear as the nighttime ones do, and that's why I don't get the email from as much from the daytime shadow people witnesses. But most of it that I get seems to happen at night from the email I get.
Have you ever, like with animal shadows, have you ever heard of, have you ever studied whether or not like Native Americans viewed them as omens? I've heard, like on highways and stuff, people say a black dog or a black shadow dog is a bad omen. Have you ever looked into anything like that?
I have heard of those, and I have heard of the black shadow or the black dog phenomena where seeing one always seems to be foretelling of someone's death or some tragedy is about to happen. But shadow animals stories that come to me don't seem to have any bad outcome to them. They're just seen. So, and I have heard of Indian folklore about shadow beings being seen around, the reservations and things like that. I don't know what to make of them. They usually tend to be, the Indians believe, or at least the Native Americans tend to believe that they are omens, usually bad ones. I don't find that exactly the case in the stories I get. So I don't know how to make the connection there. But I am aware of those stories.
Yeah, it was just, I'm actually, some of these questions I'm asking you, we do an interactive interview where I'm actually looking at the SHTF411.com mini chat. So some of these questions are actually coming off of there. So I'm not coming out of left field. They're actually interactive listener questions. So, yeah.
Okay.
So can you, as far as the animal shadows go, one of the questions from our thread on this topic was, what significance, if any, like we've got animals, and that's a broad category because there's a lot of different kind of animals. Do cats and dogs in particular, have you noticed an increase in sightings of those, and have you attributed anything interesting to that?
Actually, I get so few stories on shadow animals, I probably have less than 10 out of all of the 2,000. Yes, surprisingly. Either they're not writing to me on this particular issue because my website is about shadow people rather than shadow animals, so maybe that's the deterrent. So I don't have enough there on my database to really make an official pronouncement about what they are, and they seem to be. I think that the majority of those are probably ghosts. Just as animals can be ghosts, simply because they're seen more outdoors than indoors, like the black dog, the blackbirds, the thunderbirds, things like that. And again, you're dealing with omens with a lot of those. They don't tend to be personally threatening to anyone, where shadow people are very personable to the witness that it's happening to. So that's the only reason I can think of is why I don't have very many shadow animal stories. But I do make note of the fact that they're there. Mm-hmm. And I welcome any stories on shadow animals. So
what about children?
Shadow children?
That's a great. I was actually asking like how many children see shadow people, but wow, I never even. If you could address both of those, shadow children and shadow. What am I saying? Shadow children, people seeing shadow children, and also, what reports have you had of shadow people from children?
Yeah, addressing the last first. Most of the email I get, people are telling me about a past event that happens when they're children. Probably more than 75% of my database is about recalling an experience that happened when they were children, when they first saw shadow people. So this is this age between, I would say, 5 and 13 is one of the most likely to see shadow people ages. And another thing that just struck me recently when I went through all the stories and the database was how many of these stories about children who first see them as shadow people are also going through sort of a stressful family situation. I couldn't help but notice all the divorces that children were going through when they were also seeing shadow people, which is really interesting when you think about it because they're losing a parent. So part of them is maybe they don't feel as protected as they would if both parents were there. Their families being split up, and that in itself is a very disturbing event. And although a lot of people might not agree with me on this, I wonder how much of it is nighttime terror simply because the family is disintegrating and they feel more vulnerable. And the shadow person is really a part of their dream, what they're dreaming at night. Or are shadow people taking advantage of children at this very vulnerable point of their time? Because
that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. That's something I'm looking at, that I just simply noticed how many divorces were occurring when these children were witnessing shadow people, and I think there's got to be a connection. It's just simply too strong. So it could be, well, children are easily scared and they're more vulnerable than ever. So maybe these shadow people are drawn to this.
Has anyone ever tried to conjure shadow people? Like when you mentioned the children and divorce rates, my mind spurred to emotional states of being, and when I guess maybe when I say conjure, that is conjuring. Is there? You mentioned that the children were in that would be an emotional state of duress. So, what about the adults that have seen them? It sounds like there's a pattern there where they're almost conjuring them through an emotional state of being.
Right. Well, that's what I'm wondering is if, for instance, the witnesses who see shadow people at night when they're paralyzed, they can't move, they feel vulnerable. The shadow person is very threatening to them and seems to draw energy from that paralyzed witness. And what they do with the energy, I'm assuming, is they try to manifest themselves more strongly. However, they can't really hurt you at the same time, but they like to be threatening. Well, why would they do this? And adults who feel vulnerable too, and usually shadow people are less seen after the age of 22. So that if you're in your 30s or 40s, usually people who see shadow people are also going through a stressful time. Either they're divorced, there's alcoholism involved, sometimes people are meth users, they see a lot of shadow people. So other things, stressful things are happening in their lives too. So something is drawing the shadow people to these stressed people who seem vulnerable, and they take advantage of them at this time. So,
is there photographic evidence?
Yeah, there has been a couple of photographs that people have shown me. I can't tell you if they're shadow people, you know how hard it is to tell if something has not been doctored by Photoshop or something. But there's a video online. It's on YouTube, and I don't know the name of it. But we were talking about children who see shadow and shadow children. Well, this particular video has a very interesting very clear picture of a child-sized shadow walking through a kitchen behind a woman who's working at the stove. And I wish I could remember what the name of it was. You could probably look it up. But that is about as close to what I think would be authentic as I think you could get. So there are some interesting... Yes, it was. When I saw it, I thought, oh, my goodness. Now, this one I can kind of believe. If it's and you don't know if they're authentic or not, but especially on YouTube. So, but the ones I've seen, it seems like it's murky or it's foggy. It's not real clear cut, and it might be one of the more amorphous type of shadow people that I've seen. But yeah, they're out there.
Have you ever investigated Mothman?
No, I haven't, and I noticed that a lot of people say there are some similarities between Mothman and the Shadow Man. For one thing, Mothman, I think, is seen as a gray figure. He's pretty close to being a shadow, and he is threatening as well. And he's seen at night, I guess. Maybe not.
Has anyone... Mothman is seen at night. Usually, from what I understand, Mothman is foretelling of impending doom.
Exactly.
So, has anyone ever reported anything like, that shadow person saved my life?
I can't think of anything right offhand. I can think of one woman who said she saw a shadow man at night, and he seemed to point his finger at her, and she felt this incredible pain in her stomach. And it turned out the next day she had to go to the hospital and have her appendix taken out. Now, I don't know if he was trying to tell her something or he created it, but that's as much as I can come close to what could be considered a message shadow person. But I don't think most of them come here to give messages.
Now, I couldn't imagine that. I think I'd be afraid for the rest of my life.
Yeah, she was terrified. Mm-hmm.
The next day, yeah. How many people that visit your website are just trying to study on the subject or present, not so much study on it, but are there people actually reaching out that, I mean, do people get stalked by shadow people? You said it's generational. So, I mean, do they have, do people report being literally stalked by shadows?
Did you say stalked? I couldn't hear that.
Yeah, stalked.
Stalked
yeah. Is it you said it was generational?
Oh, stalked.
So go and
okay. That's my cold interfering with my ears. Stalked, yes. Some people see, it's not uncommon for a person to see shadow people on and off throughout their life. I mean, it's not common, but it's not unheard of either. In fact, it's probably about 30% of the databases on people who see them at certain intervals of their life. And usually it starts when they're a child, and they might see them for 2 years on and off, and then it might pick up again when they're a teenager, and for another year or two, and then again in the early 20s. As I said, usually after the early 20s, after about 22, 23, they start to taper off. So, generation. So they do probably feel stalked because they might have an experience every night for a couple of weeks, and then it will just simply stop, and then pick up again a few years later. There's also, what makes it even more confusing is I've gotten shadow people associated with certain pieces of furniture, or only in one particular house. And until that piece of furniture was discarded or they moved away from the home, they never, ever saw a shadow person again. So those shadow people are place, what are they called? They call them locational entities that stay in an area or in a piece of furniture. as opposed to personal shadow people that actually stalk a person and would go from home to home with them, or home to dormitory to nursing home. They come and go throughout certain stages of a person's life.
Out of all the reports you've had of shadow people, what do you think is the most compelling story that you've ever been sent?
I think there is, I can't quite remember the name of it, but I think I called this the village of Sheridan, Wyoming, and it was a woman who said that when she was probably about 10 years old, her family drove from the state of Oregon to Washington, D.C. one summer. And as they were passing through Sheridan, Wyoming, and this was probably in the 60s, she said they drove through the town, and she noticed that the people were kind of, you couldn't see any details to them. She says they seemed gray in form. She could see a man with a wood splitter splitting wood, a woman hanging clothes on a clothesline, men moving around houses with tools or talking to converse with each other. In the town, she says it was more like something out of the 1940s or 50s rather than, 1960s. So she said that as they drove through the town, they seemed to watch her van as it was moving through the village, or this is actually a town. And the people of the town, she says their hands were more like mitts. You could see the thumb, but no discernible fingers. And she says the people started to congregate in the middle of the street looking at the van as it was moving through town. At first curious, then they seemed alarmed. And then they started to move towards the van, and then she says they were eventually running after their van until they passed the city limits. And they seemed to stop right there at the city limits as if they could not move past that line. And she says she was terrified because she thought all these men had tools, and that if they got up to the van, they would probably smash the windows. She didn't know what it was, but she says nobody else in her family saw it, was just her, which was, I thought, was a very interesting story.
It's almost like they went into the other dimension almost.
Mm-hmm. Their plane passed through the shadow person plane, and for a time there, for about 10 minutes, they were in another dimension. I think so, too. And it could be that the whole family saw it, but nobody wanted to talk about it because she said she didn't dare mention it to, except for the only thing that tipped her off that another family member might have known it was as the townspeople were getting close to the van running after it, her father seemed to step on the gas as if to try to get away from him.
Wow.
So I thought that was a very interesting story. I never heard anything like it. It's on the webpage.
Have you speculated? I mean, I'm hearing that, and I've got another question off the mini chat that I need to ask. But do you think these people, we're talking about ghosts and dimensions and everything, and energy just transfers. So, have you ever speculated if these are people from another time? Do you think they're actually in our time, our dimensional time?
Yes, and that's certainly possible. They've really only started talking about multidimensional planes and places, really, I think, rather recently. And with the string theory and everything like that coming up in quantum physics, they're speculating. Of course, nothing can be proven. So it is. I'm open to the idea that we are really seeing maybe our own plane, but at a different time. We're going through time warps. Very possible. One of the things I think is most fascinating, I brought it up the last interview I was on, and the hostess just totally wouldn't buy it. I thought that maybe it's very possible that these watchers that you see, and you have to wonder why they watch us doing ordinary things like watching TV or making dinner. I mean, what's exciting about watching somebody do that? Except for maybe these people are from the future. Maybe they're our own ancestors, and maybe they're coming back to see what we were doing at this time. You know,
I could believe
it's
that.
sort of like an ancestry.com through time travel. But
absolutely,
you know, that's still pretty far out for a lot of people. But
well, I can see it, but at the same time, it's like enjoying the small things in life. We enjoy the small things, so to dismiss that we're actually being watched, to understand that, I can see the validity in it. Have you seen any reports on these shadow people being a predominant feature at like funerals or in cemeteries?
No, I really, well, probably only because most people don't hang around in cemeteries all day long. So where you're going to see shadow people the most is where you are the most. For instance, at the home or in your office or your place of work is usually where people see shadow people because that's where they spend most of their time. They don't spend a lot of time in cemeteries. Now, I have a friend of mine who did some filming in a cemetery and got a video of what looked like a shadow person walking between two tombstones. And I did see it, and I don't know what to make of it. If it's unfortunately, it was the shadow person is really far away, so you can't tell for sure that something else is not affecting it. But it certainly looks like a shadow person standing up, walking across one tombstone, and kind of like all of a sudden he's just out of sight. And then a few minutes later, he pops up again. He walks over to the other tombstones, and he kind of jumps out of sight. But yeah, I mean, I suppose they could appear anywhere. I mean, I had a police officer tell me that he was at a stakeout in a park, a wooded park, and he saw a group of shadow people coming down a hill. It scared him nearly to death. But so yeah, they can appear anywhere. So
I wonder if you reported that.
I don't know. I haven't got one on a funeral. What? Pardon?
I said I wonder if he reported the group of.
No, he didn't.
A hard one.
No, he didn't. He just told me about it.
Yeah, I was curious because we had Paul Smith on, who does remote viewing, and he was. I asked him if the police departments use remote viewers, and he said, "Well," and basically it's kind of one of those things they just don't talk about. So.
Well, I think the police have the most interesting stories. First of all, they wouldn't bother to write me if I think it wasn't on the level, and it's usually not something really bizarre anyhow. So, but they don't know what to make of. Sometimes make out what they see sometimes, and so it can happen to even police officers and nurses in convalescence homes. They very often see shadow people, and people in nursing homes will see them too. That's another thing. My daughter works in a convalescence home, and she talks about how some of the residents there will talk about seeing them. So
now that's interesting. You mentioned that you've had police contact you and convalescent homes. Where are? I know they're seen everywhere, but where are the major sightings occurring? Is there a trend, a pattern?
They're really mostly seen in people's personal homes, and usually at night. They're not. I don't get as many emails about workplace shadow people or experiences in the workplace with them. It seems like it happens. Maybe people are just too busy to notice them. You know, they're doing work and they're not sitting around relaxing, watching TV, and maybe more reflective at night. So I think that they're just mostly seen in the houses, in homes.
Wow. I find it intriguing that because I've had two experiences. The one I told you about, and then I had another one, and the other one I had was my dog actually saw it too. And have you had any reports of multiple people seeing the same shadow, or a person saying, yeah, my dog saw it too, or my cat was freaked out?
Yes. In fact, I'm getting more of those all the time, where it's not just one person who saw the shadow. His wife was there and saw it just as well. Or two friends saw it together. Or I just got an email the other day where there was a girl said that she was in a sleepover with 4 other girls, and they were both all on the bed, and they saw it. They saw a shadow person in the room, and it freaked them out. And they were trying to convince the writer, the author, to go across the room and turn on the light, because they were so scared. They wanted to have the lights on. So, yeah, they're seen by. That's what makes it more believable. I mean, let me tell you my own experience with shadow person. I was in my 20s. I was going to college. I was living at home, and I was studying late at night. And I got up, and I went to turn the radio on to a different channel. And when I turned around, there was this man standing in front of my closet. And all I could see was the outline of an ordinary man, just 5'9", 5'10". He looked. Now, I didn't think, oh, that's a ghost or that's a shadow person. I thought somebody had broken into the house. What I couldn't figure out is how he got there, because if he couldn't have gotten there without passing me, all the windows were closed. It was wintertime. And I turned around to go look for something to, defend myself with. And when I turned back, he was gone. Now, so I only saw him for probably about 3 seconds. And, I just don't see things. I don't see ghosts. I'm just not one of those people. And I don't believe, and at the time, back then, I didn't believe in such things. But I couldn't get over the fact that it seemed so real to me that I went and checked the whole house anyway, just make sure that everything was locked and shut. And when I came back to the room, he still was not there. But I sat down thinking, my gosh, I still feel as if somebody is staring at me. And I couldn't yeah. And so, and that was leading up to what you were asking me, and I forgot what you were asking me, but I think that's the way most shadow people show up.
What about the train of questioning I was on was animals, like multiple people seeing them, or animals.
Oh, yes.
Are there reports?
Well, what I was meant to say was I was on my own. Nobody saw it with me, so I tended to discard it. I thought, well, I probably only imagined it. So, because it's easier to disbelieve yourself if you're the only one that sees it. Now, if you have somebody who witnesses it with you, the credibility of your own sighting goes way up.
Have you ever mapped out, like on a map, to check for if there are certain states that have higher percentages of shadow people reporting, or if there are ley lines, potentially ley lines, if they actually match like a earth energy type construct as far as where they're sighted?
Well, the one thing about the database that I didn't do, and I wish I had maybe thought to pose this question when people are submitting their stories, was to tell me what state they're from. So I don't know where a great deal of these stories are coming from. I will tell you, though, that they not only happen in the United States, a lot of these shadow people sightings the stories come from England, Australia, India. I've gotten them from Taiwan, Germany. So it's happening all over. There doesn't seem to be any particular place. I guess next to the United States, England probably has more shadow people than anyone else. And they have a lot of ghost sightings too, but there are also people that will talk about it now, are more open to it.
Sure, so, I can see that. It's one of those topics that everyone I know has experienced this phenomenon and seen something, but it's actually having the strength, I think, to actually speak out and talk
Well, that
about
was the reason for the Shadow Person page. And actually, I had a web page full of ghost stories, and my web page was associated with a chat room back in the 1990s. And we had so many people coming in the chat room describing shadow people that I decided, you know what, I'm going to put another page on the website that just devotes itself to shadow people. Well, the mail I got from that was, thank you for doing this, because I thought I was the only person that was seeing shadow people. And there was sort of like this need to discuss it. So I kept up the website, and just for shadow people, not ghosts, not saying that they're not ghosts, but I wanted to, especially since most people seem to see these things at the corner of their eye, they happen at night, they happen in a particular fashion that witnesses who see ghosts, it doesn't happen in the same manner. It's a little bit different. So, that's a lot of people have come forward and said, boy, I thought I was the only person seeing shadow people, and now it's really open there. It's being talked about on chat shows, on TV shows. It's amazing how you didn't hear this word. I mean, I'm 57. You would have never heard this word 30 years ago.
Oh, no.
Never.
No, not at all.
But
what about people that are there reports of, this is kind of, I mean, this one's actually really tough to answer, but maybe you've actually seen some reports on it. Let's say people that are on their deathbed, have they described, like, seeing, like, the angel of death? Or are there people that believe that the shadow people potentially could be like, I don't want to, it sounds bad, but, angels of death, as far as, carrying, like the ferryman type, where they take you across to the next world?
Well, I think that's why they are sometimes seen at convalescence homes, and that these beings, I don't think all of them, I don't think that most of them are harmful, but they certainly seem threatening if you've never seen them before. So, yes, they might be even maybe just shadows of our own relatives waiting, to see us take the next step over to the next plane. So I don't want it to be frightening to people, because the shadow of the angel of death and shadow people are often seen as in negative light, that if you're seeing shadow people when you're dying, and of course, I mean, you think of the movie Ghost, where the shadow people drag the souls to hell. I don't want to leave people with that impression that that's why shadow people might be there. They could be there to portend death. I've known a few people who have told me, yes, that just before their mother died, father died, they saw shadow people. I don't think that the majority of shadow sightings have anything to do with omens, though. I think the majority do not. But there might be a few who do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually really curious about that. I'd have to wonder have you ever gotten two reports on the same shadow person as far as appearing differently to two different people? I wonder if one would actually see it more of a light being. Have you ever had reports of them being like angelic? Not
yes,
angel of death.
I have. Believe it or not, I have. In fact, I just noticed recently that the ones that report shadow people as being more angelic or helpful tend to be women who see them. They think that usually they might be frightened of them. Usually they're frightened of them when they first see them. And in retrospect, they realized, that shadow person never hurt me. And he seemed like he was just kind of watching over me, as if he was more like a guardian angel type of thing. And I say he is that most shadow people tend to be male forms, or have a masculinity about their presence or attitude. So, there are reports of from people who say that these shadow people are not harmful at all, and that they're good. They're like angels. but they're just seen in this form. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, we are almost at the top of the hour, and I don't want to. We're working really hard to keep our guests just to an hour interview because we go for another hour, but it's just open lines, and we're trying to keep our guests in a happy mood where we're not bugging them too long, and they'll hopefully come back for another interview.
Oh yeah.
Which this has been a really wonderful discussion. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
Right. So, is there anything that would you like to plug your website or possibly give a brief description of it for the people that came in late?
Oh, sure. My website is the official Shadow People Archives. It has web pages on lots and lots of Shadow People stories. I have lots of pages on Shorty Shadow stories, which are shorter than 450 pages if you don't want to read some long, lengthy email. It also has a page on coping with Shadow People where I'm trying to get together emails that discuss just how they got rid of the Shadow People, because I do get a lot of people emailing me and saying, help, I'm being terrorized by this thing. And so I do have a Coping with Shadow People webpage that talks about getting help and getting support. And I also have a page of true ghost stories that I've had for a long, long time. And that's about it. It's www.shadowpeople.org. Oversized appendage. It might be their head. It might be their hands. But something's not quite exact human form about them. The third type is the amorphous type. And there are quite a lot of these. These are shapeless, cloudy, whirling, smoky shadows. They're not in definite form. They don't have a shape. And a lot of people say they'll see. Go ahead.
Are they like a cloud or?
Well, I put a collection of these amorphous shapes under that particular title because they're simply shapeless. They can be cloud-like. I've heard them be like a pillar, just like a pillar that goes up and down, or they swirl and move, or they might be orb-shaped. Okay, they don't have any form. They seem to be predominantly shapeless. And then the last type, for no other reason, I put this fourth type as animal shadows. People do see animal-sized shadows in their houses, outside even. They can be cat-like. They can dart across the room. Sometimes they see small shadows along the baseboard. They don't seem to fit the other three, so I developed this fourth one for just animal-like shadows. So there are about four different types of Shadow People.
Have you determined what their reasoning of being is, or their nature? Are they just benevolent, or are they here for good purposes or bad purposes, or different purposes?
Again, right. It is hard to determine exactly because they seem to be doing three different things. A certain segment of shadows are just standing there. They don't notice you, but you notice them. But they don't seem to be aware of you or their surroundings. It's almost as like the planes have somehow merged. Their dimension is merged with ours for a brief period, and you're watching a shadow being, looking off in the distance somewhere. He's not aware that he's in your dimension, and that's usually a brief occurrence. The second type is the more common type. Those are the watchers. Those are shadows that usually stand in a room and watch a person. Why they watch it totally escapes me, but it's almost as if they're here to study us, or they're doing some research, or maybe they're time travelers. This part I don't quite understand, but they're watching us. They come to watch, and and they're always surprised that they know that they're being watched. As soon as a person sees the shadow and reacts to it, the watcher's shadow will be surprised that it can be seen. And these are these watcher shadows flee the minute that they are seen. They leave. Now, the last type is the mountain.
Tonight we'll be joined by Miss Suzanne Fowler, a teacher, researcher, and mother of two, who at first glance leads a fairly quiet life. But when you dig a little deeper, she runs one of the most extensive paranormal research sites on the Internet. Her specialty is shadow people, something we've all seen out of the corner of our eyes, but just not quite sure what to make of it. To learn more about shadow people, visit shadowpeople.org. That is SHADOWPEOPLE.org. Tonight's show will be broken down into two segments. The first segment will be an hour interview with Miss Suzanne Fowler, followed by up to a second full hour of open lines. The call-in number to tonight's show is 760-542-3929. Again, that's 760-542-3929. Good evening and welcome, Suzanne. You're on the air.
Oh, hello. Santos, I believe it is. And the name is Susan.
Okay.
Not Suzanne.
Okay.
That's all right.
Okay. Well, I wanted to thank you for joining us again. You said you have a cold, and I really appreciate you coming on the air with being a little under the weather, I guess.
Yeah,
so.
I hope you can understand me because I'm quite plugged up, but I didn't dare want to take Benadryl or anything like that, a Dulupi or something. So
no, you're fine. The show's been running really smooth since we started. I've been getting better and better at it, and we started the show to make it an addition to our forum, and I don't know what happened tonight. It may be the shadow people, because I was having a hard problem getting into the switchboard.
That's what I was thinking too. They're probably running amok on the show.
Yeah, we see these things. Let's just jump right into it, because I really was awestruck at. I literally have not had this many problems with it. It wasn't not being prepared. It was the screen wasn't working. We see these things out of the corner of our eyes. We turn to look, and we catch a glimpse of something that we think we saw, and then we end up questioning our own judgment. Now we call these shadow people. Can you tell us more about them?
Well, shadow people are kind of an entity or a kind of ghost, or you can call them a demon. But they're what they really are is an ultra-dimensional being from another dimension, another plane of existence, that every once in a while our planes kind of converge or pass through one over another. And you can see these things just for a brief moment, and then you can't see them anymore. It's brief. It's usually really a flash that you see these beings out of the corner of your eyes or in front of you. They don't stay for very long. Most of them don't. So, and ghosts can be one category, but I think there are many dimensions and many planes, and the shadow people are one particular type of plane.
Do you
and
believe
they can be broken down in other planes too, for the subcategory of shadow people that exist.
There are different types of shadow people?
Oh, yes, there certainly are. There are 4 different kinds from my database, and I have a database that I've been collecting for over 13 years. I have approximately 2,000 entries in the database, and I've broken them down to 4 different types of shadow people. There are the humanoid shapes. They're dark. They're a human silhouette. That also includes the garbed shadow people. Those are the shadow people that have hats, hoods, cloaks, but they're usually a definite human, identifiably human form, an earth form. Then the second type are the exaggerated humanoid forms. I don't think these beings have ever been human. They're very human-like, except for they have very exaggerated features like long arms. Their long arms tend to be elongated. They seem to be unusually tall. I've gotten emails from dozens, just hundreds of people saying that they see shadow people that are over 8 feet high, some even as tall as 9 feet. So that's not a normal human shape to see a human being that tall. As I said, they usually have some other